is one stock that is seeing huge moves in trade today, and that has to be JSW Steel. It is down in excess of about 6% in trade. This after Supreme Court directed liquidation of Bhushan Steel, Power and Steel. Remember, this was one of the companies that JSW bagged in the IBC process. My colleague Ankur is here to tell us the significance of this particular order coming in from Supreme Court. What it means for JSW Steel, what does it mean for the PSU banks who actually recovered part of their money that they had lent to Bhushan Steel on back of this, and also what does it mean for the entire IBC process? A lot of questions for you, Ankur, to help us decode this entire saga right now.
Yes, we are back to square one if you talk about the resolution process of Bhushan Power and Steel, because the apex court has turned down the acquisition which was done by JSW Steel. Now what the apex court is saying, it is saying that why JSW has used mix of equity as well as OCDs, meaning optionally convertible debentures, and why not only equities, and also there has been delay in timelines. Now in their reply, JSW Steel mentioned that the actual order has not reached to them. They will study it and they will also appeal in the highest court regarding this implication. But for now, it is the first case where the resolution was implemented, in fact way back in 2021, and after 4 years now Supreme Court is saying that actually COC should not have accepted this kind of resolution plan, and now this is null and void, and more importantly there will be liquidation which will be done for the company.
Right. The fact that this sort of a move coming in, actually, Ankur, it's very big, right? Because it's just not JSW Steel that is going to be impacted by this. It's also going to be PSU banks, isn't it, Ankur?
Yes, definitely, especially JSW Steel, because you would understand that this case went from NCLT to NCLAT, then many back and forth. There were 4 bidders who were serious about it, and finally JSW got it for 19,700 crore. And even if you take the base price, leaving SR Steel, this was one of the biggest buys which you call about dirty dozens, which were approved by Reserve Bank of India. And now after 4 years of implementation of actual order, Supreme Court is saying that the acquisition was illegal, and not only to the buyer but also to lenders. Questions have been raised. COC has been questioned. Why did you accept such kind of resolution plan?
Absolutely. A lot of questions are going to be raised on back of this Supreme Court order. Thank you so much for that, Ankur. We also have Nikunj joining us in the studios. Nikunj, this is a very big case. Given the fact why it's big is the implication that it will get, right? It may just open Pandora's box, given the fact that you have now Supreme Court talking about this entire Bhushan Steel and Power and the fact that the liquidation process now.
See, there can be a twist in the tail, so to speak, which is that they can always go and appeal and then they can get a stay on it. So
that's exactly what JSW is saying. We'll review it.
So if it reviews it, if there's a legal stay into it, if the court says status quo and then we will have another, hearing, then nothing frankly changes. But if it is something which now becomes the new law, then what happens? This becomes the precedence for the entire IBC. This becomes the entire precedence for the liquidation process, the entire process. What was the whole idea of this entire IBC? IBC in a sense was constituted because there were bad assets, or there were errant promoters who in a sense did not do the right practices, and on purpose they had really taken money from the banks, and then in a sense they had really done some kind of sideline deals. That really was the spirit in which some of these liquidation processes were done, which is they were approved by court, they were approved by IBC, and they were approved by all the legal processes. So if this liquidation process comes under pressure or under question, it changes everything. And then this could have serious implications. But my point is that let's talk about it once we know that this is the end of the road. Today, I think the action and the reaction is more sentiment, because this is a news which has come more like a bolt out of the blue. Nobody was anticipating this court case. It's only when they came out, market started reacting to it. So I think it's in my book, with my limited understanding of where it stands versus where it could go. This may really not move beyond a certain point, and I think the stay is coming. If it does not come through, then we will understand it then we will have to understand how the entire liquidation process would be reversed, because that is again a very complicated process. At what was the right pricing, what was the right asset, the assets have multiplied over the years, what happens to banks if the liquidation process starts. You talked about PSU banks. So if JSW, worst case scenario, if they have to liquidate the assets, the money will go back to banks, right? Because JSW paid to the banks, and when they acquired the asset, in this case, if you acquired something, if you sell, you will have to still pay to the banks, because banks in this case, they become the original owner. So the ownership has to be transferred. When the ownership has to be transferred, and then the liquidation process will start, then court has to approve it, then it's a process, then there would be an auction. And whatever proceeds will come through, they will go back to the banks, because banks are the original owners, because JSW will have no ownership rights. And the level at which these deals were done, when the liquidation process was done, it almost happened before COVID, right? That time the real estate and the land and the stock market valuations and the JSW group, everything was so strikingly different that in this entire liquidation process, banks actually would end up making more money rather than what they actually got in the first liquidation process. So I'm trying to build scenarios here. I don't know which scenario would be at play, but logically and sensibly, they will go to the court, maybe get a, and then you go to take it from there.
Yes, exactly, because given the fact that this is a huge sort of a move coming in, it will actually shake the foundation of the entire IBC as well, right? Given the fact that you will also have the NCLT that will be in question, the fact that the resolution process went through. Exactly. So in that
ownership
way,
will has to be transferred back, then auction will start, JSW will have to sell, then courts would come in. It's not easy, you know, these are things which happen because of court. Why is the stock reacting? Because it's come more like a bolt out of the blue. It's not a binary event. Nobody anticipated it. It's just that when it came in media, everyone said, "Ye kya ho gaya?" So I think.
Does it warrant like a 6% decline?
See, markets in the short term are governed by several factors, and one of them is sentiment. And the sentiment in steel right now has not been particularly bullish. Why? Because the steel prices have been low and tariffs war are at play, and steel in general is going through a tough time, so to speak. So for a weak sector, when there is bad news, the impact always would be magnified. That's how markets actually would move. Look at Zomato. I don't think the numbers are that great, but the stock reaction is positive because it's a strong stock and everybody thinks that tomorrow will be better than today and growth will come back. So the stock reaction is just not there. Another stock reaction, think about it, IndusInd Bank, so much of bad news came in. But markets expect that, okay, the new management, whenever they would come in, they would be better than the previous management. The stock after the news has actually gone up. So it depends on the positioning of the stock sector. 6% I think is lower if they have to do the liquidation process.
right,
They will be much higher.
Yes, absolutely. And just a reminder for our viewers, given the fact that you had Ankur talk about the dirty dozen who were in this IBC case, some of them were Electro Steel Steels, Bhushan Steel, Monet Ispat, SR Steel, Bhushan Power and Steel. Also, you had Diwan Housing Finance, which is now actually taken over by Pyramid as well as Shrey Infra. So these are some of the discounters who are companies rather that were admitted under IBC, and that's how the resolution process took place. JSW Steel was the one that bagged Bhushan Power and Steel, and today that Supreme Court order is something that you need to watch out for. Like Nikunj was mentioning, the fact that most likely that this would be reviewed, and also there would be a further challenge to this sort of an order coming in from Supreme Court. JSW Steel has definitely said that they're reviewing it. So let's wait and watch out for how this actually transpires. For now, it looks like a knee-jerk reaction, but Kunal, on the charts, JSW Steel for you.
Well, of course, after such kind of a price action, the near-term prospects for the stock would get dampened. But we look at JSW Steel more as a levels, more from a levels perspective, and I think in that sense we would look out for 1060, which is the recent high for JSW Steel, as a major breakout point. Until the time the stock doesn't break past about those levels, you might probably expect that based on the news flow surrounding the stock price, it could be a lot more volatile.
All right, so that's the take coming in on JSW Steel. The stock is indeed volatile, almost a 6% cut is what we are seeing. But Kunal, give us some sense on some of the other metal counters as well, because just at the start of the day, I saw stocks like Hindalco and Tata Steel. They were actually up in the trade. Almost a 3 to 4% gain is what the stocks witnessed just at the start.
Yeah, in fact, for the overall metal counters as such, I think I would probably expect that there should be a more follow-through up move, because what you're seeing right now is JSPL making a comeback, Hindalco, Tata Steel, they are on the verge of breaking past about their previous major swing highs. In fact, the best part about the charts for
these stocks is that stocks like Tata Steel are now trying to close the gap which has been created on their charts almost like a month back for these stocks when they had fallen sharply, almost like a 20% correction. So that could be I think a big trigger for many of the metal counters going forward. So I think devoid of the news flow surrounding one of the stocks from the metal pack, JSW Steel, when you look at the entire pack, Hindalco, JSPL, Tata Steel, etc., there seems to be consensus breakout.
All right, so that is coming in on Tata Steel and the other metal counters.